Hi, this is Fran with Stampendous. As many of us are staying in place, I hope that you will find some crafting will be just the thing to help you spend your time wisely and have some fun. And you may remember from your days of staying at home that it was when you learned to watercolor. So what I'm doing today will be featuring some of our wonderful little dog kisses. This is a clear stamp set. And I decided that while many of you will not have had a chance to get the newest clear stamps that were part of the watercolor series, that it would be a perfect time to feature some stamps that you may have on hand already. These have been very popular, and they're the perfect theme for us today to learn how to watercolor and mix some browns and grays. And so we will start that in just a moment here. And if you haven't subscribed, be sure and have with your YouTube account that you subscribe so that you can be sure and not miss any of the videos that we have for you. And I'll do just the briefest of review. You can go back and see the earlier ones to learn the basics, but I'll try to make sure that in this one it will work to at least have the understanding of what materials we're working with. So we're using the Daniel Smith Paints Essential Set of 6 colors. We're using a very particular palette that lays flat and gives us a beautiful layout and a place for all of the different colors. The chart will identify all the colors and everything. And we're going to be doing more with this area up here, mixing our browns and black, cool black colors. And we've developed this wonderful color wheel with Daniel Smith so that you can see how these 6 split primary colors, when I take the 3 warm colors together, that's what's giving me the browns that we're going to be using today. And the 3 primary cool colors, when mixed together, unbelievably will give me the dark cool colors that we need. And this beautiful array of gorgeous colors all come from this one set. I'm using my favorite watercolor brush. I'm using Canson watercolor paper, cold press, 140 pound. And with those materials, we are ready to start in here. So in one of the earlier videos, we had talked about a minimal style, a natural style. This was all using the little birds. A whimsy or whimsical style, and a mixed media style. And I thought it would be fun today to play with a little bit of these different styles as we work with the different dog stamps in the Dog Kisses set. For all of my stamping, I have placed my clear stamps on the handles, and it was easy to put one on each end, turned around this way. And I've got my VersaFine black ink, and I've stamped all of this ahead so that you can just watch more of the painting techniques. And we're going to start from the minimal, and then we're going to step it up and get into some of the more advanced things. And you should be able to improvise with whichever materials you have and whichever stamps you have to learn some fun techniques. So in my palette, since we're using a lot of browns and grays to paint all of our little furry friends here, I've set up in advance. I put the 3 warm colors, the scarlet, the new gamboge, and the French ultramarine. You can always reference the chart here to see. And I've placed these in this large area at the top of my palette, and now I simply will take a wet brush and begin to swirl back and forth between those 3 colors until I get the shade of brown that I'm looking for. And generally I'm not doing all that much with browns, but now we're going to be doing a lot more of that today. So I wanted to explain my little plan here using the panels, the pockets over here to the side. And what I've done, and just so you, some of this takes a while to do the mixing, and you just have to eye it to see what's happening. And remember that whatever has been mixed before will be revived. And even now I'm going to move things out of the way, and I'm going to use my spray bottle to get this whole area damp again. And so whatever you've mixed before will remain there to be revived with water and lifted on your brush. So here's a dark brown, you can see, and I have loaded up this first pocket up here with as much of this dark brown as I can. And then now I want more of a reddish brown, so I'm dipping into more of the scarlet over here. And now that that looks like a beautiful scarlet, I'm putting that into the next compartment. I might want even a little bit more of that reddish color to it. And then I'm working it off of my brush into that compartment. And then if I want a lighter brown, then I'm just adding more of the gamboge. And now with this mixture, I will put this more into this compartment as best I can. And down here was a place to do an even lighter shade and add some more water to it if I want a soft or a very light tan color perhaps. And okay, so none of this paint has been wasted. I've just moved it around, but by using those compartments, that is going to give me quite a bit of paint to work with actually. And over here, I've done the 3 cool colors in this compartment, the rose, the Hansa Yellow Light, and the Phthalo Blue. And again, by swirling those together, I will get some cooler dark colors and work it to black. And admittedly, the black takes longer to get it all mixed. And if you only had the rose and the blue, you would get a purpley color. But if you notice on the color wheel, the complementary color of your yellows is the purple. So it's surprising, but the yellow is actually what neutralizes that purple to get me closer to the cool black or gray colors that I want. And you just have to keep working it around. So I've tried to do some of that ahead so that as I get going, you won't be just waiting for me to mix. And you're just going to have to get the feel of it. And if you have some paints in some of these colors and can just squirt them out, that's great. But I wanted you to know that today I will be using only what I have mixed and made from my 6 primary colors. So it is doable. And in case I switch this out as I go along, I have also just today tried another method that I want to show you. And by having a second palette, I may be able to move it into view as needed. So let me start. I've turned it around here. But what I've done, I made use of all the pockets back here. And I squirted the 3 colors. I started with my warm colors, so Scarlet, Gamboge, and the French Ultramarine. And I squirted little dabs of each of those into this first compartment. And then while it's still wet out of the tube, and I would suggest you start with a very small little bit. You can see how little is on here in these color dots, so a little bit goes a long way. You don't want to overdo it, but put a little bit of all 3, and while they're wet, I used a stylus to completely mix them together, and then I actually added just a little bit of water to help the colors mix together a little bit more readily. So that was going to be my darkest brown. Then I knew I wanted lighter browns, so in the next compartment, I moved some of what I had mixed into this compartment, and then I decided I would test adding the Hansa yellow light. So I swirled some of that in. And then in the next one, I took a little bit of that mix, moved it into this compartment, and added quite a bit more of the scarlet to get a lot of a reddish brown. I added a little bit of that into this compartment and began adding a whole lot more of both the Hansa yellow light and the gamboge, with just a little bit of that. In this one, I had only these two until I added just a dab of that brown into this one to tone it down. And over here, you can see it's primarily the yellow light with just a little bit of the gamboge and just a touch of some of the other brown. This one over here is a combination of the three cool colors that are in this compartment. And with that, I mixed up a batch that would work as a darker black. And since to tone that down, I'm going to add more water, I didn't need to do a whole subsequent range of colors at that point. And a couple of tips in doing that. I then took a brush, a wet brush, and I tested each of these colors with a wetter brush to see where adding water, what shade of color I would have available to use from my larger batch of paint. So if you've got a lot of browns in a project that you're working with, those tips should be very helpful. And I was able to do my mixing with the stylus and then clean it off. So again, you wouldn't want to put the stylus with a bunch of brown mix on it into your yellow tube, but by cleaning things off, you can work and establish a whole beautiful spectrum of browns and give that a try. Okay, so now we will be able to paint, and by doing some pre-mixing and having those puddles ready, we will have, everything will go along more quickly. My water system is such that I have a large container that I refer to as my swamp. I can clean my brush off in this area, and when I want clean water, I can go into what I refer to as my smaller well water. I also have the needle tip if I need to squirt water in a particular area, and I was using the spritz bottle. So let's start with our little pooch here, and let's see. I'm going to test, make sure my brush is clean to start with so I know where I'm going. And if I have to move back and forth while one thing is drying, I might as well get all of these in view. Okay, so all of their little pink tongues are easy to do with the rose color. And I've turned things around, but I can reach the rose up here. And again, I don't want a real red tongue, so I'll test how much water and paint is on my brush, and I think that looks pretty good. So I'm just going to paint in all of their little tongues. And I know this is going to dry a little bit lighter than what you see. And since these are small panels and we're not going to be painting out to the edges, I didn't worry about taping anything down. And that works pretty good. And some of these look a little bit red, so I might take a damp brush, blot off some of the paint. You can see I always have a little tester handy, but now I can use my brush to lift just a little bit of that color. Okay. So if you have your own dogs and different breeds, you may paint your little characters to look with all the markings of your own pets. You always have this as a reference to start with. And I may have done this with Copic markers for what was used on the index, but it gives you a good color place to start anyway. And I'm now, we'll try some soft brown here. And again, I can see from the color sitting here in the middle, and I have all of this lineup of colors to the side. So we'll just start in and do some soft washes all the way around. You'd want to make sure this little tongue wasn't still wet, but it's such a small area it dries pretty quick. Okay, so that might work just there, but it's a little bit on the light side, and I might want a little bit more of the yellow tone, so I'll test that. That looks nice. And I'll come back in wet on wet and add some more, a little bit more intense color here. Soft little brush strokes is all it takes. The lines of the stamp define things, and if you want, with the point of the brush, you might make the little furry tips go past the lines of the stamp itself. And then if I want a little bit darker to shadow some areas, I spotted a darker area of brown, and I'll add a little bit deeper color underneath the chin. I can dip into this area, a little bit darker up here. Okay, life is rough. I'm telling you, when we can't go get our hair done, our little dogs maybe aren't getting groomed, we're all gonna look a little bit rougher. But that's okay. We're gonna get through it, aren't we? Okay, so now over here, and even for hugging our friends, we may have to send them a card with a hug message on it right now, and that's okay. So have some fun painting and mail cards to your friends and family when you can't visit. Okay, so I like this color for the lab, and it had a little bit more of the gamboge or the yellow tone to it. And again, I'm not trying to follow the lines, just do little swishes around. If you leave some white around the muzzle, that may sort of just bring more focus to the face, and test that we have a little bit more intense color here. And I'll go under the chin, around here. Yeah, that's good. That's really about all you need. And this is that minimal approach. I could just stop right there. I might add something more to it, but that's looking pretty good. You can see how quick it is. Watercolor is just so fun, so easy. And improvise with whatever you have available to learn some of these simple techniques. Okay, and then over here with this one, looks like it could be another lab in the darker colors. So let's try some of the darker brown here. And it's a little bit wet, which means it's going to create perhaps more of a puddle. So here was a bit of a darker color. And okay, that looks pretty good. With this one, the trick is not to go so dark that you can't see the lines of the face. So we'll just go around, and again, leaving some of those highlights of white will work quite nicely. And maybe the paws are a little bit, have some white patches. Okay, and maybe I'll find a little bit darker bit of color. Test it here, it's in the same tone. Occasionally, if you haven't mixed the colors together well enough, they look one color when they're wet, and then they separate out a little bit more when they dry. So that's why I added some water to kind of help the colors mix, and then they dry and then they're more mixed when you come back to them later. So just adding that little bit of darker color, I think, enhanced the look there. And I just realized I didn't paint the little tongue over here, so might as well, let's do some different colors on our dog, and then later we can go back and do the tongue. And since that's a nice brown, we'll go ahead and do our little paw prints here. And since that's getting a little bit light, we'll add a little bit more of a darker brown. Perhaps a little blue bow. It's dry enough. And over here, maybe we'll do a little green bow. And with the minimal style, you could stop right there. But sometimes it's nice to put just a little bit of shadowing underneath. So I'm going to come in here with an interesting dark shade. Might even look a little bit purpley. That's a nice color. And I'm just going to run my brush underneath here for a little bit of a shadow. Okay. On this one, again, I drew the little box around the edge, and if you have a micron, I'm using an 05. I think it is nice when everything is dry. You might go in and just, especially on the eyes, get a nice black, and that'll make the little sparkles in their eyes really pop. So I add a little bit of black to the nose and to the eyes. There we go. Those look fine, but add it where you need to. And then in the same way, I just drew even a wobbly line down here at the bottom and all the way around. I kind of just looked at the distance from the edge of my little cut panel and decided that would work pretty good. And with these two, their little paws are coming forward, so that gave me the idea of just drawing a line up here to make it look like they're peeking through a window of sorts. And so those are some easy things to do. You could use a ruler, but I think the style of it is loose and it fits just as well to do it like that. So let's add a bit of color to this for fun, and I'm going to, it's just barely in view up here, but with my rose and the phthalo blue, I can mix a magenta, kind of a more reddish purple color, and I'm going to be sure and test what's on my brush, and that is a really dark purple. And just so that you see, I'm going to kind of get some of it off my brush here, add a bit of water, and test again. I want a little bit more of the rose magenta color. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to flood some of this darker color right up here in the top area of my box. And then very quickly get mostly just water on my brush to move this around. You can see I had to move quick to not get a hard line up here, but there's quite a bit of paint, and I want to now lighten it around the words and just pull it down a little bit here in the background. Okay, and I just didn't want any harsh lines, but a quick fadeaway is easy to do. And that's kind of fun. So here, if I went out of the line a little bit, I might just leave it, but I can use my lift or mop-up technique to kind of remove some of the paint along that edge. Okay, so that adds a fun little bit of color. And again, you've got to do that when the dog area that you painted was dry so that it wouldn't all run together. And as the paint dries, if it's a little bit uneven, just a clean wet brush is helping me kind of blend it out a little bit. I wanted to leave the words readable. And I might try blotting it here with my clean area of my paper towel. Okay. Okay, on this one, let's have some fun with a whole bunch of colors, just to show you how easy it is. And I'm going to turn my palette around more to where you're used to seeing it. And you could paint these dogs all different crazy colors and just have some fun with that in this mixed media style. But since I was showing you about the browns, we did that on the dogs. But now let's try some crazy colors in the background. So if I start with my yellow, while I know my brush is clean, I might have checked it there, but that looks pretty good. Then I'm going to go to some of the gamboge color, mix in a little bit of that, and move from there over to scarlet. And since I'm moving in the order of the colors in the palette, I don't really need to clean my brush because it's in rainbow order like we've talked about, and it will all just mix together. And to get my greens, I've got yellow by itself in one compartment, but in two more compartments I've added the phthalo blue and the French ultramarine blue. And these two together with a wet brush will give me a place in my palette over here for a nice lime green. And the white of the palette is helping me see the colors, so I didn't test it, but I know that the green is going to be what mixes the most readily from my yellow now that I'm moving this direction in the color palette. So now I'll go from that green to a bit of this darker green. And the Daniel Smith paints will always revive with a wet brush, so I can make use of all of these puddles to revive them and quickly add another fun color of blue, which with a bit of the green gives me another beautiful aqua color. Okay, so fun, so quick and easy. And if you like the idea of splattering things, then you just get a whole bunch of paint in your brush and you just hit it against another firm object like this. I'm not going to do it at the moment. And you will get different effects if what areas are still wet or still dry. So make sure you don't splatter it all across your palette, but you can have some fun with that. And I'm just going to add a little bit more of the rose since that sort of faded out on me over here. So this would make a beautiful card, just putting it on craft paper with an edging of red or something. But let's go ahead and maybe add a little bit more color just for fun. And again, these Daniel Smith paints are always translucent, so having stamped first, I can add more color on top. So I'll check some yellow, and I'm just going to do some swashes of color here just for fun. And maybe a bit of green. Why not? Okay, and I'm just doing a big brush stroke that's just loose and well, we're getting all the colors in here, so why not add a bit of scarlet and maybe a little bit of blue. I just won't put a color next to it that is still too wet or isn't a color I can mix it with. But again, your palette and the lineup of colors is rainbow order, so things will mix the most readily, go in any direction. And the blues at this end mix back in over here with the purples and back into the reds. So if you put wet on wet in that sequence of colors, you will get the most pleasing mix of color. And here we have the reveal of all of our little panels that we did with the fun watercolors. I hope this gives you some fun ideas, things to practice using your dog kisses, and give hugs where you can, and have some fun making some quick cards that you can send to your friends while we're all staying in place here. And have fun, and we'll have more ideas to come, so be sure and subscribe with your YouTube account so that you can see the next video that we'll have for you. And stay well, and prayers to all of you. Take care. Bye-bye.